Yeah, done with my Oreo.
Okay, good.
Do we really know what happened?
The brother did.
The brother, that's what I thought too.
I mean, that seems like kind of obvious.
Hey, do you want to talk about death?
Yeah. I mean,
Murdery thingy.
Is it going?
It's going. Hello.
Welcome.
How are you? Sit
Yay,
down.
What's up? Yeah, come sit
Take
down
a
with
load
us.
off, you know,
Grab a cup of coffee. I've got peppermint hot cocoa in the kitchen.
Feel free
if
to
you'd
make
like some.
yourself whatever you'd like. Welcome to Mystery Murder Thing.
Yeah, welcome. My name's Chloe.
My name's Mario. How are you, Chloe?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. And how are you?
Pretty good.
Yeah, so how can I help you today?
All right. And we're both now call center workers. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Are you ready to do the mystery murdery
Thingy. Our mystery murdery thingy.
Is yours a mystery, a murdery, or a thingy?
I have two murder mysteries.
I have a...
Yeah, you said yours
I
is
have a,
real,
I have a mystery
real
murdery
fucked up.
thingy.
Yeah.
It's a mystery murdery thingy.
It's like the whole
it's all of
shebang.
it.
The kit and caboodle.
It's,
Well, why don't I go first?
Okay.
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 So, more murder mysteries from Africa this week. That's what
Well, yes, mine is also from Africa.
what we promised. And as I said last week, I'm gonna do an unsolved serial killer.
Yeah, you are.
So this is the one known as the Sleepy Hollow Killer, who stalked the communities around Pietermaritzburg in the state of KwaZulu-Natal, or KZN, in South Africa from the late 90s till about 2007, in two separate sets of incidents. So the Sleepy Hollow Killer's MO, modus operandi, in the first spate of murders, which again was like in the late 90s, 98, 99, was that he would sexually assault his victim and then would kill them by strangulation using the victim's own undergarments, panties. Which is, you know, we see right in other, this is not an MO that's super atypical, but it is very, very gruesome and unfortunate. And he would leave his bodies near the N3 highway there in South Africa. So at some point it kind of became obvious, right, to the authorities that these murders were linked, right, that there was a probable serial killer going on. We've talked about that recently, right? Like with these cases in Canada.
In British Columbia.
In British Columbia, right, where you see a similar MO and it becomes obvious at some point, okay, there's probably a serial killer at work here. So in 2001, an inquest was convened, and 7 women's bodies, victims' bodies, were exhumed for analysis and also to attempt a facial reconstruction. But apparently that was not successful. They never released any photos or anything. Which I've seen in other cases, you know, where they'll exhume the body, use the skull to create a reconstruction of the face, and then release photos or a sketch based on that or something. But that didn't actually end up occurring here.
That is so mind-blowing that that's even a thing that
Yeah.
you can do.
I know.
And that it's, like, relatively successful.
And it's used in paleontology and archaeology, well, I guess archaeology, right, not paleontology, but, you know, where they'll, you know, reconstruct the faces of these, you know, ancestors of ours, and it's used in forensic analysis and like reconstruction that way. But of course now a lot of it's done by computers, but I think some of it's still done by clay. Anyway, that inquest was, concluded at the end of a year, at the end of 2001, with no clear indications as to what happened. So that they didn't really apparently come to any real solid conclusions at all. And it seemed that, you know, there was kind of this lull, right, where, okay, and then it stopped happening, which is not atypical of serial killers either, to take kind of a break or a hiatus, right, either between the first kill and the next kill, or between a set of kills and then another. And unfortunately, that seems to have been the case here as well. So the Sleepy Hollow Killer seems to have kind of reactivated between February and October of 2007, over which time there were the bodies of 3 more victims found, kind of right, you know, near each other in time as well as space. And they bore other of the hallmarks of the MO of the Sleepy Hollow Killer. They were strangled with their own panties, and they were sexually assaulted. But there was a difference here as well. The bodies were, unlike the first, set of victims, severely burned post-mortem. And it's unclear as to why the killer would have done this.
He's escalating.
Escalation, perhaps. There's another, hypothesis that I read from an anonymous investigator, that it was maybe to cover up evidence because they knew that the MO would be tied to the earlier killings. Who's to say, right? I mean, and again, as we talk about, sometimes the motivations and the quote-unquote logical thinking that goes into the mind of someone who would be capable of doing this is not necessarily rational in the way that you and I and almost everyone else would understand, right? So who's to say why they did this? But I think those are all good.
That's a good point.
Good hypotheses, right? Well, it kind of made me think of it. We've been watching Mindhunter, and I think they talk a lot about that.
Which we should watch after this.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Where the path from A to B might not be the A to B that we, we think of or we understand, and that's important when you're trying to catch someone who's doing things like this. So anyway, the bodies were also found near the N3 highway. So there were some other victims possibly as well, in other communities surrounding there, like Bloemfontein, if that's how you say that, in the central part of South Africa, and then several hundred miles south in Port Elizabeth as well. There are some victims that may or may not be linked. And, so I already talked about that. And, also about that with the hiatus and everything. So anyway, after the killing of as many as 13 victims in the 90s, that's how many it ended up being. Oh, and at least 3 in 2007, it's thought that the Sleepy Hollow killer, if in fact this is kind of like this one singular serial killer, could be responsible for as many as 16 deaths or more. And eventually the police superintendent, Henry Budrum, decided to create a special task, force task team to look into this and kind of see, what was going on. And 6 experienced officers were tasked with looking into the killings, led by Senior Superintendent Gops Govinder. And they were tasked to, quote, investigate the murders and examine all the circumstances, modus operandi, and material evidence for all cases. And a, quote, top psychologist attached to the SA Police Service's Investigative Psychology Unit in Pretoria, the capital of South Africa, had visited Peter Maritzburg in November to assess if a serial murderer was at work, close quote. And that type psychologist thought there probably was a serial killer at work here. Which is not that hard to discern, right? But it does kind of, substantiate it with more evidence and kind of like a deeper knowledge of these things. But this was not necessarily a foregone conclusion either, I think, since there were those differences between the two bunches of murders of these women. And also, there are just a lot of murders, unfortunately, going on, not only in South Africa, which according to one index, the Nobeo crime index is at this point, like around 2016, the 3rd most dangerous country in the world.
Wow.
Behind only Venezuela and South Sudan. Not only that, but this city, Peter Maritzburg, was in that same index listed as the most dangerous city in South Africa.
Holy shit.
Yeah, there was one source I was like
wait, what time period?
Around 2016.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what the source that I had, that's when it was from. I'm not sure when the index was from necessarily, but around that, around that time. And the index itself, I should say, like some of the methodology behind it was not necessarily, I think, that sound. It in part was like a self kind of, where they would just ask people questions. So it wasn't necessarily the most scientific either, but this was a very dangerous place. There were a lot of murders going on. It's safe to say. And this high crime rate definitely impeded the investigation into these murders. This, task force that was set up. Not only because, there's just a lot of stuff going on, but because reportedly the investigators were not allowed to just focus on this supposed serial killer. They also had to take care of all the other crime and everything.
I guess you can't, right? Like,
I'm not really sure how that usually
maybe
works,
if you have
but
the people, but
there was in some of my sources there was a sense given that this investigation was not given really like the attention that it needed to be. That it wasn't given as central a place as like the police made it out to, in a sense.
Okay.
And also of the people that were convened, the 6 experienced officers, some of them eventually quit. Some of them, one of them got killed in a car accident, unfortunately. So, and they were not replaced. And eventually, the funding also dried up, and then there was no task force, and there was no real conclusion as to whether there was a serial killer or not, who did it, and anything really. Nothing really ever ended up coming of it, unfortunately.
Whoa.
So, yeah. There were 3 victims that were eventually identified, but only 3 that were ever identified by name. And they were Nemusa Dlomo, found New Year's Day 1998 in Mokindi. Priti Shalembe, found in May 1998 near the Comas River in Boston, or Bulwer. Adrina Mbukazi, who was found in June 1998 in Howick. Only one possible perpetrator ever really arose in like any of the research that I did, and he was a person who was arrested for that we kind of, I guess, is more solidly that killed this woman near Howick, but the crime really only superficially resembled the Sleepy Hollow killer's MO, and the connection seemed pretty tenuous. Like, people were kind of, it seemed like, grasping for some suspect that it could have been.
Okay, yeah. It was a reach.
It was seemed kind of a reach. And the superintendent, Budram, that I mentioned earlier, he said that he did not believe that the murder was linked, or that this was the purported Sleepy Hollow killer. And yeah, like I said, that's all I could really find on this one, unless there's some kind of break in the case someday, but I don't know. Doesn't seem like there would be. So, that's the Sleepy Hollow killer.
That's...
Yeah, unsatisfying.
Yeah, that one was unsatisfying.
Sometimes mysteries are unsatisfying. It's kind of the niche. Embrace the mystery. But also investigate. Find out who did these things. Please, not that people in fucking Pretoria are listening to me, but,
Well, it's funny because mine is a mystery for some of the same reasons, but we'll get into that.
Funny how that happens. Okay, I'm going to do one more of these African murder mysteries, at least for now. I guess maybe we'll do another episode in the future. So anyway, my second story is about the killing of another woman, unfortunately. And in this case, it's the killing of lesbian and gay rights activist Fanny Ann Eddy. Fanny Ann was from Sierra Leone, not a generally welcoming place to gays and lesbians, unfortunately. Maybe less so in 2002, I don't know. Maybe it's worse now, I'm not really sure. It's not been good for that whole period of time, or at any time, really. Part of that is due to the colonialization and the laws that were created at that time, which were discriminatory and have persisted. Some of it is a sort of misguided notion in some of the leaders and people in Africa that being gay, lesbian, etc. is, somehow not African, not like endemic to the African spirit or something. It's ridiculous. People say the same thing about America, that it's not like American somehow. It's ridiculous.
None of the arguments against LGBTQ rights are make any sense ever.
No, they don't.
None of them are logical at all. Ever.
I know I'm preaching to the choir, but
preaching to the choir.
It's just infuriating. And just to, I guess, give some context in the sense of like who this person was, right, at the outset. She would have also vehemently agreed with all of that. But unfortunately, she was living in a country which most people didn't. Most people were pretty discriminatory, it seems like, or at least the authorities and the official kind of line, So anyway, in the face of all of that, Fanny Ann founded the first of its kind in Sierra Leone Lesbian and Gay Association, to bring people together, to bring help and visibility to the gay, lesbian, transgender, etc. community in Sierra Leone. And, again, she was one of these people that we've talked about so many times, right? who faced certain danger, but chose to persist in what she knew was right, what she had to do, what was her duty in a sense, right? And she felt a strong duty to herself, to other people, especially, sexual minorities who were, being persecuted. So, Fanny Ann's advocacy led her, not only to prominence in her native country of Sierra Leone, and she did end up becoming a very prominent person and advocate in her country, but throughout Africa and even globally, as she traveled throughout the African continent and eventually to the UN.
Wow.
In Geneva to advocate on behalf of gay and lesbian rights in Africa, and a specific motion to to that effect, at the UN, and she tracked down her country's whatever you call it, mission or whatever to the UN, who I can't believe would be very receptive to what she was saying, but she tracked them down and made them listen and say, you need to vote for this. There are people like me, you cannot deny. Because, some rulers will do that, in Africa or whatever. There are no gay people in my country. Well, that's fucking bullshit. There are gay people in every country at every time in the whole fucking world.
It's
so
to point
stupid.
people out.
Oh, it's so stupid. So anyway, she gave this address, to the UN conference in Geneva in 2004. And she said that people like her face, quote, constant harassment and violence in Sierra Leone, and that, quote, homophobic attacks go unpunished by authorities, further encouraging their discriminatory and violent treatment of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people,
Right.
close quote.
Right, it just increases it. People get bolder.
And unfortunately, that same year, a few months later, Fanny Ann Eddy would become a victim of the same violence, perhaps, that she spent her 30 years advocating against. Yeah. And I say perhaps because a lot about her murder, her very unfortunate murder at 30 years old, leaving a 10-year-old son and a girlfriend behind, a lot of it's very mysterious. So let's kind of get into that. So on the morning of September 29th, 2004, Fanny Ann Eddy was found dead in the offices of the advocacy organization that she founded, right? The Sierra Leone Lesbian and Gay Alliance. I can't remember exactly. So it seemed that multiple assailants had broken into the office the night before when Fanny Eddy was working alone, that she had been sexually assaulted, stabbed, and that her neck had been broken. And that her body was left there until it was found the next morning. And here's kind of a quote of from the Human Rights Watch, just kind of reacting to the news of this from their director of Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Rights Project, Scott Long. Quote, Fanny Ann Eddy was a person of extraordinary bravery and integrity who literally put her life on the line for human rights again and again within her country's borders and beyond. She drew attention to the harassment, discrimination, and violence lesbian and gay people face in Sierra Leone. Now she has been murdered in the offices of the organization she founded, and there is grave concern that she herself has become a victim of hatred. Close quote. But like I said, many things about this murder remain mysterious to this day. It's not clear how extensive of an investigation was done, at least in the research that I did.
We don't even know that?
It wasn't totally clear because there were some indications that there was some forensics done, there was some police work put into this. But then, again, like a fucking broken record, right? Let me just spoil right here, at the end of this, there's not going to be an answer. Because, obviously, right, it's a mystery. But it's, again, one of these where it just seems like no proper investigation was really done. So, but it's a little more complicated than that. So, let me try to get back on track to my write-up. So, okay, so yeah, she was okay. So there were aspects of the crime that were very contested in some of the sources that I read. That just said like conflicting things, And the Criminal Investigation Division of the Sierra Leone Police Force, they were the ones who took the lead, right, on investigating the crime. They contended that there was no evidence of sexual assault, but that the likely manner of death was strangulation, not the snapping of her neck. So the cause of death, the trauma of the body itself, it is contested. But I didn't read about any sort of like autopsy or coroner's report.
What is that based on?
I don't. It's just based on what people are hearing. That's kind of the sources that I was read. Somebody tells someone something else and it gets reported in the news.
Was there a lot of attention drawn to it in general?
Yeah, no, it was a huge. It was. There was a lot of attention brought to it in the press and everything, and by some of these international organizations who, with whom she had been working. But despite that, it isn't. I just never read about an autopsy. Isn't that weird? Wouldn't you think there'd be an autopsy done? I mean, to at least establish, okay, what was the actual cause of death? What was the actual trauma done to this person's body? I don't know. It's kind of mind-boggling. But I don't know. I didn't see anything about that. So obviously the perpetrator of the crime as well is a mystery. But there was a prime suspect that was found and arrested, not long after the crime occurred, actually. But
Yeah.
here's the kicker.
Yeah.
He escaped from custody while he was in
Are you shitting
in
me?
the court in custody awaiting trial, along with like many other prisoners who just escaped. Now the thing you have to understand, and this came up many times in my research, was that Sierra Leone at this time was just coming out of a horrible civil war. There were no good civil wars, but you know what I mean. For over 10 years. So the infrastructure, especially in terms of the judiciary, was, more than decimated.
A lot of chaos.
So that makes it a little more understandable, not understandable. It explains why these conditions may have been, I don't want to excuse it. Obviously, they should keep their prisoners in fucking custody before, they don't run out. So anyway, this guy was a janitor at the organization that Fanny Ann ran until a few weeks before her murder occurred, when he was fired. And when he left, he said he was going to, quote, take revenge.
Why is that why is that
it's,
trigger so common?
But does that mean he was the killer? I don't know.
That's true.
It makes it more likely, sure. But does that necessarily mean he was the killer?
Do they think it was multiple people?
Well, that's the other thing. Most people think, including the police, think it was multiple people. So even if it were him, there's still other people out there.
So was it a political act or was it an angry act?
We don't know. The motive is also mysterious. We don't know if it was a personal grudge, if it was motivated by bias against her because she was an advocate. We just don't know. It's mysterious. It's galling as hell, but we just don't know. But a lot of people do think that it had to do with her advocacy. But those people also want to think that. And I'm not saying anything against them. I'm not saying that they're wrong or right. I'm just saying that
we don't know. Period.
We don't know. Again, yeah, I just want to underline that. It's like I'm not making any conclusions. But I think it's understandable that people want to think that, because it fits this narrative of her as a hero, and she was a hero. But she was a hero long before she died. Right. And whatever had happened with her murder, she would still be a hero.
Interesting.
So, I don't know. Like I said, she unfortunately left behind a 10-year-old son. Her girlfriend, Esther Chicalipa. She, of course, Fanny and Eddie continues to have an effect through her work in the struggle for sexual rights around the world, but especially in Africa. Mm-hmm. There's a poetry award named after her, and of course her organization, at least one source from 2016, said it was still going. I assume it's still going now. And I wanted to just kind of end with an extended quote from Susanna Fried at Outright Action International, who apparently knew Fanny Ann. Quote, Fanny Ann Eddy broke the silence for us all. She courageously brought the struggle for freedom and dignity in her own country to the world stage. Last week, that voice was silenced forever. As Fanny Ann worked late in her office in Freetown, several men broke in, raped, and brutally murdered her. To all of us who knew her and shared the great privilege of her wit, sense of the absurd, steely determination, intelligence, and unwillingness to let bureaucracy and lies stand in the way of justice, our loss is incomprehensibly great. Close quote.
Wow.
I just thought that was a very powerful quote.
Yeah.
And again, tells you the cast in which, again, I think I've said this in the last episode, sometimes it's not as much about the verity of what actually occurred, or it's not so much about the verisimilitude of what actually occurred. It's about the verity of, like, what is perceived to have occurred. This is the cast in which this person's murder was seen. So that's kind of how we understand, this mystery. So those are my 2 for the week.
That was good.
And my sources. Shalissa Peters and Candace Subramoni at IOL. Ingrid Uhlerman at The Witness. Wikipedia. The Sleepy Hollow Killer and Fanny Ann Eddie Pages. BBC News, Human Rights Watch, Susan Fried and Paula Edelbrick at Outright Action International, Africa Online News, and Laura Mills at Making Queer History.
Wow.
Okay, now it's your turn.
It's my turn.
It's fun to take turns, I think. But then my mom was a kindergarten teacher.
Oh, correct.
It was, I say.
Oh, good.
Recently retired.
All right. It's funny that your first mystery was in South Africa, because so is mine.
Connection to South Africa.
Not like in South Africa,
Sure.
but because I'm talking about a plane crash. So in the waters between South Africa and Taiwan. We'll talk about it. So yes, let's explore what happened to South African Airways Flight 295. Ooh.
What is it, I wonder?
So
it sounds like it's going to be really tragic and inappropriate to joke about.
just a moment.
Just wanted to get the giggles out right at the beginning. You remember when we were watching that YouTube video of, like, that local reporter who they had the really funny story, and then they just hit her with the, like, death story, and she was, like, still giggling through the whole thing.
She was like, "This is how I lose my job." I remember she
she was like,
said that, and I was like,
"Today's
you know, she might.
Lose my job." Right, you just might.
You just might.
You just might. Nice thing about having a podcast where you don't get paid, can't lose your job.
Can't lose the job. It's not a job. Okay.
That's right.
Moving on. So I'm going to start with the basics. So Flight 295 was a Boeing 747 flight, and on November 27th, 1987, it was traveling from Taiwan to South Africa. Very long flight. So 9 hours into the flight, the relief crew, they're done with their shift, so they switch so the main crew can take over. And they were doing a routine stop to the island of, I think it's Mauritius. I'm not sure.
Mauritius?
Mauritius.
Yeah, Mauritius.
Island of Mauritius.
Mauritius?
Yes.
Mauritius, yeah.
So among those on board were 71 South Africans, including 19 crew members, 47 Japanese, 30 Taiwanese, 2 Australians, 2 Mauritians, 2 from Hong Kong, and 1 each from the Netherlands, Britain, West Germany, Denmark, and South Korea. So this was a flight with people all over the world, you know. Mm-hmm. The plane layout itself, it's called a modernized 747 combi, which is like combination. And it was called the Helderberg. So it was a very reliable, trustworthy, safe plane. It was useful and made for long-range flights. It's designed to carry both passenger and cargo. So it's a big, big plane. So picture, you know, like a huge commercial airliner, right? And at the bottom, it has 2 huge cargo areas and then there's the whole rows of seats, and then at the back, behind the passenger seats, is another cargo hold. And there's the cabin, and the cockpit is one level above the cabin. It carried 159 people that day, and it held 6 large pallets of cargo. I think it said it could hold like 6 to 12 or something like that. So, I mean, obviously, things don't go well. This is
I'm sensing that.
Impending doom.
Yes. The sword of
it's
Damocles hangs over their heads.
It's weird. Well, okay. 1 hour before landing on the island, the smoke alarms went off in the cargo area behind the passenger seats. So by the time, people are alerted, the fire is raging and smoke is everywhere. So when there's any kind of fire emergency, the crew is trained to go through special safety checklists to manage the fire. So one of the first things was that they're instructed to land at the nearest airport, but the nearest airport was the island of Mauritius Airport, and it was still about 186 miles away.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So, circuits start popping. The fire starts burning through wiring and causes short circuits. The instruments there start to lose power. And at this point, smoke fills into the cabin, and passengers are having trouble breathing. One member of the flight crew is asked to fight the cargo fire. Captain Uys, which I think that's how you say his name. Uys. What do you think? Ice?
I guess so, yeah.
Captain Ice does an emergency descent, and he requested a full emergency. And he is in contact with air traffic control, with the airport, and they get in contact just before 4 a.m. So at this point, the smoke is thick and it's noxious. It's toxic smoke. Mm-hmm. It was pouring into the cabin, and at this point, the captain is losing sight, he's confused, doesn't know where he is. The instruments are down, but they continue to follow the instructions from the checklist. And in between controlling the fire and helping passengers, one of the crew members goes back to check out the cabin and sees that the smoke is getting even thicker. So they are forced to do, this is last resort, they're forced to do an emergency maneuver that is rarely ever performed, and they were forced to open the door. Yeah. So
they intentionally opened the door?
Wait. There's a way. I guess there's a way. The only hope is, it's really their only hope right now, sitting the smoke.
But you said they already descended, right? So they're
They're descending.
They're descending, okay.
So once the plane descends to 4,500 meters, that's when it's safe. So
right. You won't have the explosive decompression.
Exactly. It's safe for the passengers to breathe that outside air, and the pressure was enough to force air out quickly, but not dangerously.
Okay.
So that's when they open the doors, and there's lots of airflow, and as that air is going out, smoke still keeps entering, and then it's in the cockpit. But the cockpit is totally enclosed. There's no door for them to open.
Right.
Air traffic control continues to give instructions needed for the emergency landing, and the airport, they're getting the runway ready, and they're getting, crews out there. 4:08 a.m. is when the plane stopped responding. There was no response for 36 minutes. So after that, an emergency was formally declared. Search and rescue crews head out, and officials are alerted. And the flight waiting back home at the Johannesburg, is it Johannesburg or Johannesburg?
I think people say both.
Johannesburg Airport is officially changed to delayed. So there's people waiting there. They talked with one woman, and she was waiting for her parents because they're about to go on holiday. And she was just waiting, chilling. It's the plane's delayed. Oh, that kind of sucks. Yeah, I'll wait here a little while, and then wildest nightmares. So the aftermath. they do searching all throughout the night, and a rescue plane sees the first sign of aircraft wreckage afternoon the next day, so about 8 to 10 hours later. Rennie Van Zyl, he is assigned to the Helderberg case. He's one of the main investigators. So he's looking into this, and this is rare. So, like, major accidents, especially on Boeing, 747 Boeings, at this point, it was 87. So this was the first time in a 20-year history that someone had died on the Boeing, especially by smoke inhalation. So people were extremely stunned, it's rare. As they keep looking, they eventually find that 8 bodies found in the water, and once they do blood tests and autopsies, they find traces of soot in the trachea, and they like confirm that at least 2 died of smoke inhalation. So what they are guessing is that even as the crew was trying to land the plane, some of the passengers were already dead. Mm-hmm. And that timeline also, we'll talk about the timeline a little bit later as well. There's also clues that show that. So a life raft and dinghy were found, but that's really it. Like, all the passengers were presumed dead. 159 people. Media goes crazy, and at this point we're trying to figure out what happened, what caused the wreck. And there was already like a sinister feel when, the news came out, and people immediately were like, oh, this isn't good. This was on purpose. This was, an attack, a deliberate attack. And note that this is 1987. So this is the apartheid is happening in South Africa. Right. So there's a lot of tension. And
there'd been planes that were hijacked and bombed, like, not, too long before this or around the same time. I'm trying to remember when the Lockerbie incident was. I think that was in the late 70s. That was, like, a really famous...
Is that also a plane crash?
Plane crash, yeah. That was,
I feel like I've heard of that.
A terrorist incident.
When did it happen?
I'm gonna look it up. Okay. Keep
going. So, and as they're looking through the debris, it takes a long time, and they found 3 watches, and that gives them the time of probable impact. So they determined that the impact was about 3 minutes after the last communication with the plane. So it flew for 22 minutes before going down. So once it really went down, it went down fast.
Answer 1988.
1988. So, oh wow.
So yeah, it was actually
a year after this.
A little after.
So, the plane itself was part of the South African Airways. It was part of the fleet, It was a very reliable plane. It was technically a government body. It was owned by the government. And they changed their air routes to protest the white regime. So at this time, black African countries forbid their planes to fly over that airspace. And so their routes were longer. They would fly around the bulge of Africa to the Atlantic. So they would go around instead of across. There were lots of sanctions on South Africa. They were not welcome. And in the years leading up to the crash, South African Airways, their offices all over the world had been a target for massive violent protests. And like I said, the plane was basically owned by the government. So that people were definitely skeptical, So the investigation. There's the main things that they gotta find, right? They need to find the black box and the voice recorders, and they basically just need to find as much debris and wreckage as possible. So South Africa turns to the U.S. for help. So they hired an American salvage company to find the black boxes. So just a little quick info about the black boxes. Black boxes run on these like battery type things called pingers, and they transmit a signal, and that signal has about a 30-day guaranteed shelf life. So after that, there's not much of a chance that they're gonna, connect to it and detect something. So they were racing against the clock at this point. So by the time the equipment was being finalized, it was 7 days remained before the expected battery would die, and the signal would no longer be detected. So they continued to search through debris, and they found So they're looking at all types of clues, right, to determine what happened. And they found a melted graphite tennis racket. And graphite burns at gets up to like 1,100 degrees. So that's when graphite burns. So this fire was very, very, very hot. And that might explain why also there was a fully charged fire extinguisher that was uncovered that was originally in the front of the plane. And there was like a melted piece of cargo netting was found on it. And this suggests that a crew member like grabbed the extinguisher from like the passenger cabin and then brought it to the cargo area. But for some reason or another, it was never discharged. Maybe because it was hot and there was melted metal found on it. This fire was absolutely intense.
Yeah.
So,
like they were running toward the fire and the extinguisher itself was like getting too hot to hold or something. Maybe.
Right. Yeah. So now the questions that remain here are what was in the cargo and how did the fire start? So at this point they start looking at weigh bills and stuff, right? And they determined that there were 47,000 kilograms, over 100,000 pounds of baggage and cargo on board. So they also discovered that before takeoff back in Taiwan, that there was actually like a random cargo inspection that, just they do for safety precautions, and nothing suspicious was found.
Huh. So it just happened to be one of the ones selected for the random.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So they actually know pretty much.
Right.
Unless something got missed.
Unless something got missed, right? I mean, we don't know.
Right?
So at this point, it's been more than 30 days since the plane went down, and investigators were still struggling to find the rest of the wreckage and the black boxes. And at this point, it's about money. So the investigation has cost $1.5 million, and they kind of reached a standstill, and it would have cost millions more just to keep going. So the investigation stopped, and people started to hear about that, and there was tension. What do you mean you're just not going to investigate anymore? The head investigator, Ruddy Van Zale, has to make a decision at this point to continue or not. But they did spend the money, and they continued. 61 days after the crash, sonar, they had like special sonar all over the place, detected a large object about 4,400 meters way down underwater, on a fault plateau, and it was huge. It wasn't like I don't really know how to explain it. I mean, you probably already know, but it was like a chart with a ton of black dots on it, and like, just like on the sonar they could see that there was something there. It was like a shadow or something.
Sure.
So it could be the Helderberg, or it could not be the Helderberg. So again, it's risky, but it could be something else. But they took the risk and they went to go get it. So that rescue mission was called Operation Resolve. And note that no one has ever gone that deep, ever, to salvage anything, including the Titanic.
4,400 meters?
Yes. Things are about to get nuts. Wait. Things are about to get crazy.
4,400 meters. I mean, that's like, isn't that like 2 miles?
Yes.
What?
Wait. So, yeah, like I said, no one's ever gone that deep to salvage anything, including the Titanic. So, what they had a remote-controlled sub called the Gemini, and that will be sent to videotape what's down there. So if it is the plane, it will search for key objects like the black box.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like I said before, this is extremely difficult, okay? So what they did was they attached a fiber optic cable to the boat. And that fiber optic cable was 7 kilometers long, which is about 20,000 feet. So it was enormous, right?
Yeah.
They actually had to go to a cable manufacturer to get like a custom made cable, because I guess the longest one that was like available was like 6,000 feet or something like that. So it took months to build the cable and to modify the ship. The sub was given thicker walls and better cameras to sustain the pressure, and the journey started September 23rd, 1988. So a little less than a year later, about 10 months later. And, you know, this was very, actually, a long project. It was difficult, you know, and they never really had time or money to do the trials, so they went for it, and they just went for it. Like, either it's down there or it's not.
Yeah.
So, like I said, it can be manipulated up to 4,400 meters. And this was the first time that video images were recorded this deep in the Indian Ocean. And they noted this in the documentary. They saw some cool shit. They were like, what? What is that? What kind of fish? What? They found, like, weird species.
That's why I like watching, Blue Planet or shit like that.
Yeah. And they also found the Helderberg.
So it was the Hildeberg.
Yes.
Okay.
So there was luggage everywhere. There were massive structures, the wing, the tail, huge parts of the cabin, but it was also like ripped apart. You could see like the metal piping and like everything. And it was spread over about 5 to 6 miles, the wreckage. So at this point, you know, this is a huge win for the investigators, right? And while they are also out looking for the wreckage, on the other hand, they have an investigation into the fire, how the fire happened. Mm-hmm. So this is actually super, super interesting. And, okay, so it turns out that they were screwed all along. So, yeah, you're like, what? Investigators got up and went to Seattle to the Boeing headquarters to see how the fire safety inspection was done and how it was passed, like what their standards are and stuff like that. So the Boeing test involved setting a bale of tobacco leaves ablaze. And so that fire stayed within the cargo hold. So, however, the plane was designed so... Okay, wait. So I have to make this make sense. So the plane was designed so the air in the passenger cabin had a higher pressure than the air in the cargo area.
So it was like positive pressure toward the cargo area. Keep the fire there with positive air pressure.
Right.
Okay.
So if a crew member opened the door, the air from the passenger cabin would flow into the cargo hold, stopping any smoke or gases from exiting through the door. So that was how it was designed, and when they did the test, they like, look, guys, it's successful. Like, the fire stayed within the cargo hold. But the investigators did their own tests, because the Boeing test itself had some problems. First of all, the Boeing test was in, like, a place where there's fans, and it could just go up into the air, and it's a bigger space. So, using a cargo hold with conditions similar to the conditions of actual Flight 295, investigators themselves did their own tests, and they reconstructed the fire with actual luggage and plastic covers, just like the plane had. That's what carried in the cargo. So they found that those extra pallets of luggage, as well as those plastic covers, provided fuel for the fire. So the fire actually spread very quickly before generating enough smoke to activate the smoke alarms. So the fire was basically, it was actually going pretty long before anyone in the crew, anyone in the passengers were even aware. That's why as they're going down, some of the people are already dead. So this flame that was created was much, much hotter than the flame in the Boeing test. So there lies the problem. So this hotter flame heated the air in the cargo hold, like I said, which is higher pressure, and then that heat overcame the pressure differential between the hold and the passenger cabin, and so that when the door between the passenger and the cargo area was opened, smoke and gases flowed straight into the passenger cabin. So the spacing and the math was off. Like, the environment where it was tested is much different than the environment where it actually happened. So this test was evidence that the 747 Combi's use of Class B cargo hold did not provide enough fire protection to the passengers. The FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, confirmed this finding in 1993 with its own series of tests. So at this point, they're like, okay, what are the actions that they're taking? What are they doing? And they looked at those safety checklists. And one list instructs the crew to turn on the circulating fans in the cabin, which they did. However, this checklist was instructions on how to dissipate smoke after the fire was already extinguished.
Oh, not to do, like, when the fire's still going.
Exactly. So, basically, they put on those fans and bad air starts circulating.
Which is feeding the fire.
Exactly.
Oh, my God.
The crew was basically feeding the passengers bad air, and they didn't even know it. Carbon monoxide levels were extremely high, absolutely lethal. So, and when they opened the door for, emergency purposes, that actually increased airflow to the fire and increased its oxygen supply. So,
wow.
Yeah. So, again, these instructions were not meant for the situation that they were in. And it was like, I think in the documentary they said something like the plans were never accounted for if it accounted for if there was a fire in the cargo or if there was smoke in the cabin, not both. So they also looked into getting the voice recorder. That was also super important. They needed to know what was happening in the cockpit at the time. Truman, one of the investigators, described doing hundreds of hours of video recording. Quote, if you can if you can imagine being on the football field with a flashlight that only illuminated a square foot of the football field, and you're looking for an earring one of the football players lost during the game, and it's also the dead of night, that's similar to what it was like on the seabed. So that's what they were looking for.
Yeah.
Miraculously, one of the technicians catches something, and lo and behold, they find the black box.
What?
So it actually took 5 hours to be brought back up from the bottom of the sea. So this was also a huge find in the media, front pages everywhere. At this point, it's 1989. So lead investigator, like I said, Mr. Van Zyl, took the box to Washington, D.C. to open it. And he did that for safety reasons. So, the apartheid was still going strong. And he knew that if he found, the black box and took it with him, he would be accused of tampering with it or something, or covering something up. So he did it, he went to Washington. And so the cockpit voice recorder is, or it should be the recording of the last 30 minutes of the flight. And they put it on, they turn it on, and it's really difficult to understand anything. It has been at the bottom of the sea for over a year.
Yeah.
In the end, they only got 1 minute of relevant recording. So basically, they could listen to the start of the accident before the tape stops. So they determined that 14 seconds after the fire alarm went off, 14 seconds after the fire alarms go off, that's when the circuit breaker started to pop. And then 81 seconds after the fire alarm went off, the records / and all the recording equipment, that's when that was destroyed. However, still none of this reveals what really happened, and we still don't know what caused the fire. However, we still have the wreckage to look at. So they basically bring the wreckage to a hangar and they reconstruct it like a huge jigsaw puzzle, and they reconstruct the section of the cargo area where the fire most likely started, and they saw that the cargo area floor is untouched by fire. So that means it never burned lower than about a meter off the floor, which indicates the fire was super, super hot. And walls and windows are the ones with the severe damage. But again, like, why did it start? What was on the plane that started the fire? And investigators never found why or how the fire was even started. And, it's not easy burning through the outside of a plane, right?
Yeah.
Very hot. The inquiry was never reopened, so conspiracy theories took over the media instead.
Of course.
Classic. So, some theories. South Africa was a target, and there was a bomb in the plane, and this was straight up terrorism. However, there were really no telltale signs of an explosion. They never found anything suggesting that there was a bomb in the plane. And when listening to the air traffic control tapes, the crew appeared to be calm and handling the situation. If you listen to it, they do seem very, very calm. They're like, yes, it's an emergency. Yes, we have smoke. We have a smoke problem. Yes, we're landing right now. And they were like,
Right.
It's just unfortunate because they were doing the emergency procedures, but it wasn't. There's nothing they could have done.
They were doing their job. It's just the people who were telling them how to do their job didn't do their job.
There you go. Right. So the only dangerous goods that were really listed on the cargo list was only computer batteries. So another theory is that what caused the fire was something that was smuggled on the plane, and that it's something that wasn't listed. And the South African Defense Force was... this is a theory that the SADF was smuggling the hoax substance red mercury on the flight for their atomic bomb project. Or there's a theory that reports from the Project Coast, they suggested that, in the Project Coast, you know what the Project Coast is? The Project Coast is... it was a top secret program where they tested chemical and biological weapons, and it was instituted by instituted by South Africa, which also allegedly they had developed a vaccine that would make men and women sterile, and they were looking in how to deliver it to black people without them knowing.
True genocide.
Fucked up.
Yeah.
And they were also researching how to put birth control in the water supply. So, shit's fucked up.
Jesus.
So, reports from there, they suggested that there was a waybill showing that 300 grams of activated carbon had been placed on the plane, and that led to speculation that this substance caused the fire, that so-called activated carbon. However, there's another theory by a man named Dr. David Klatzow, and he was one of the forensic scientists that worked on the case with the Boeing Council. He had his own theory. So the fire could have been started by substances that wouldn't normally be carried on a passenger aircraft. So it kind of floats off the same theory that this was maybe smuggled on. So he says the fire was not likely a wood, cardboard, or plastic fire. So he suggests that the South African government placed a rocket system in the cargo hold, and that the vibration caused an unstable chemical compound, ammonium perchlorate, which is used in like missile propellant, I think, and that the vibration caused that to ignite. Note that South Africa was under an arms embargo at the time. So the South African government, therefore, they were buying weapons, secretly.
Right.
So,
Under the L.
that's another thing that
Sure.
people were looking into. And to this day, we have no concrete answer as to what started the fire on South African Airways Flight 295.
Wow. Yeah, it just goes to show you these airways mysteries sometimes can persist for a long time.
Yeah.
We've had a few more recently too, so.
Yeah, Malaysian.
Right,
Air
270 was it?
There's one that's like 340,
Right.
and there's the one that's 270,
Right.
I think.
Because there was the one that went down over eastern Ukraine that was hit by a missile, and then of course there's the one that went down in the ocean.
Yeah, and they found debris later.
Right. There was some debris found eventually. So anyway, enough about that. What are your sources though?
Oh, my sources were South Africa Airways Flight 295 documentary, Fanning the Flames.
Okay.
And an archived New York Times article from 1996 titled 5 Bodies Found After Jet Crash. That's
Okay.
it. It was mostly the documentary.
Yeah.
But the documentary had
It was pretty comprehensive.
it was with they interviewed the main investigators, and they interviewed actual eyewitnesses, and they interviewed people, relatives that were of people
I
that
could tell
were
it was
on
thorough.
the plane.
I mean, from
Yeah.
your write-up.
It was
so,
good.
Yeah. You ready for some weird shit
in the news?
I'm gonna do mine first. Bad driving leads to $140 million drug bust in Sydney.
No, what?
File this under dumbest criminals of all time. This is
that
from Reuters. And this is in Sydney, Australia. And Australia, man. So a clumsy driver led police to a Australian $240 million American dollar drug bust in Australia after he crashed a van laden with 600 pounds of methamphetamines into a parked police car.
No.
Yes. Actually, multiple parked
Was he
police
high?
cars. Oh, it's a mystery, but probably. He actually sped away, and they caught him about an hour later. So, yeah. And I think I saw a different story about this, and it was even dumber criminal than the guy who tried to smuggle in the cocaine under his toupee. I don't know if you heard about that guy.
What?
It was a Colombian guy who literally tried to smuggle a pound of cocaine under a toupee.
A pound?
Didn't go
Maybe
well.
a little tiny baggie that you tape to your scalp or something.
He didn't
but
do it
not
the
a
smart way.
pound.
Right. So this is why they... Anyway.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's my weird shit. So what do you got?
I got... This is
You have gout.
I got... This is frustrating. It's tragic, but it's weird. It's genuinely weird. So, man's death that was originally ruled to be from natural causes. They take his body to the funeral home, and the funeral home people find stab wounds. So there was no autopsy done, apparently.
What?
So this is in Gwinnett County, Georgia. And so there was, the medical examiner was actually, or the medical examiner's investigator was, she got in trouble.
I
Because
bet.
she listed the cause of his death incorrectly. So, his name was Ray Neal, and it was listed as being due to natural causes. However, his sister says, quote, "There's no way, it was too much blood," end quote. So the officer who got there the first time, he also found it suspicious. And in the report, it says, quote, "I observed a large amount of blood on the bed and underneath Ray Neal. I also observed blood on the walls in the bathroom and on the shower curtain," end quote. Like...
little bit suspicious.
Yeah, but he had several known illnesses, including hepatitis C, but the investigator was like, that's natural death. A lot of blood loss, I see. Yeah, that's probably natural death.
Those are natural stab wounds.
Oh my god.
Wow, that's crazy. So, but they eventually did an autopsy after, I assume?
Yes.
assume?
Yes. So, the funeral home director came and he was like, quote, "This is something totally different than what they said."
Oh, no.
Yeah, so then they did a proper autopsy, and the medical examiner ruled the death a homicide.
Yeah, would hope so. Okay. Bit weird. Yeah. You could do that. Okay, good note to end on. Thanks for listening, you guys.
Thanks. I should have gone first.
I know, right? Real up note. So anyway. Thanks for bearing with our different timelines. We're putting this out Wednesday night, so
it's Wednesday.
It's
Happy
still
Wednesday.
So for a little bit, you can check out our Instagram.
Follow us on Twitter.
MarioTex30.
And if you're on Facebook, we're on Facebook too.
True.
Honestly, our Facebook feed is our Instagram feed.
I think you could say that of multiple people. So
Facebook.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Evil Empire. So yeah.
So yeah.
It's good. It's good. Well,
they know everything about you.
I know, right? I know. They were talking about that on a different podcast I was listening to today. Anyway.